The truth is, most students who aspire to come to Canada to study will need to work one way or the other in order to take care of themselves when they land in Canada. Even though they had to prove to the IRCC during the visa application process that they have enough proof of funds to cater for themselves without resorting to working during their studies. But what no one will tell you until you land in Canada is that finding work as a student is not as easy as most people make it look. For some people, it takes days, for others, it takes weeks, and for some others, it can take months before they can land a job that can help them take care of themselves after they have landed in Canada. For some of us, we were pretty lucky. We landed a job just a few days after we arrived in Canada. But trust me, there are still others who are still out there looking for jobs after being in Canada for a couple of months, and they are still using their proof of funds because getting a job is not easy. For some, it's because they are choosy in the type of job that they want to do. But for others, they are submitting CVs and they are not getting even replies. Some are even getting response from fraud guys who are trying to defraud them and steal their identity one way or the other. I was lucky to be one of the few who got a job the first week of landing in Canada, even though I was prepared to at least go a couple of months without having to work, or at least having to go around looking for a job and just focus on education. So in this video, I will share with you some of the things that you need to know as an international student if you want to work in Canada when you land during your studies, especially now that they are allowing international students to work on limited hours. So basically in 2023, as you have seen in my previous videos, international students are allowed to work on limited hours. So if your wish is to work whilst you are here, this is a good time for you to at least arm yourself and get ready before you land in 2023. Some of the points that I'll be focusing on are who can work, the eligibility requirements to work as an international student, working off campus during regular school term, working off campus during the scheduled breaks, and I also try and focus on if you are a freelancer or self-employed, what you need to do, then working on campus, what you need to know. Before the introduction of the unlimited working hours for international students in 2023, as an international student, you were limited in the number of hours that you could do when you are studying in Canada. You were responsible for keeping track of the number of hours that you do in order to comply with your study permit conditions. But thankfully, in 2023, all these things have been lifted, at least from beginning of the year till the end of December 2023. It's possible that might continue, or they might go back to their old status quo. But whatever be the case, in 2023, as an international student, you have the option to work unlimited hours as long as you don't compromise your status as a student. So here is what you need to know as an international student if you want to work. So who can work? This is important because not all international students are eligible to work whilst they are studying. If you are eligible to work during your studies, your study permit will say so in the conditions. So make sure you read the conditions of your study permit as soon as you receive it to avoid any surprises. Because there's been times where people have collected their study permit without reading it, only to find out later that it has been written that they are not allowed to work. And it takes them months to get this changed unless they decide to work illegally, which I wouldn't advise. Additionally, it will mention if you are allowed to work off campus. You don't need a work permit if you are eligible to work off campus. Some students who apply for co-op permits are lucky enough to be issued with a work permit in addition to their study permits, which opens up a whole different avenue of opportunities for them because now they can access other facilities and other benefits like anybody else who is holding a work permit. They are able to enjoy things like healthcare, other benefits that are offered to people living in the province that most of the time students are exempted from. So if your course allows you to do a co-op, make sure you apply for your co-op permit during your study permit application, because sometimes you might get a separate work permit which will allow you some extra benefits that most students might not be getting. I know this because I'm one of those people who are enjoying those benefits. I received a separate work permit, which was separate from my study permit. And even before most of these limitations were lifted, I was having access to benefits that students were not allowed to enjoy, because all I have to do is submit my work permit and I'm approved for those benefits. Now let's look at the eligibility requirements. To work off campus without a work permit, you must meet all these requirements. You must be a full-time student at a designated learning institution. So you have to make sure that the school that you are going to is a DLI. You must be enrolled in a post-secondary program, whether it's academic, vocational, or a professional program. It must be a post-secondary program. The duration of your program should be at least 6 months, leading to a degree, a diploma, or a certificate. You must have a social insurance number. That is a SIN number. That is why we always advise that as soon as you land, make sure you get your SIN number so you can start working as quickly as possible. And last but not the least, your studies should have begun before you start working. So legally, you can't start working before your course begins. So most people who say that, oh, I'm getting to Canada 3 months before my course starts, 2 months before my course starts, start working before the course starts. Basically, they will be doing that illegally. And if they are caught, there might be repercussions, because the rule says you can start working only when your studies have started. So you have to take note. Now let's look at working off campus during regular school term. Before IRCC decided to lift this limitation, in the past, that's before the 15th of November 2022 to 31st of December 2023, as an international student, you were limited to working only 20 hours off campus in a week during the regular school term. But since that limitation has been lifted for at least a year till the end of 2023, as an international student coming into Canada in 2023, you are allowed to work unlimited hours, even during the regular school term, as long as you don't risk your student status. And in this case, that means not doing anything to compromise your studies, like skipping class, not reporting to school, or do anything that will end up compromising the fact that you are a student. But so as long as you are going to school and studying, you are allowed to work unlimited hours till the end of 2023 December. And we are praying that hopefully after this test run, they will keep it and not go back to the regular 20 hours that existed in the past, which was limited most people and forcing most students to work illegally. Moreover, you are allowed to pick up as many jobs as you want, as long as you are not compromising your status as a student. So you are allowed to work unlimited hours, and you are allowed to pick more than one job during that period. So even though you are doing part-time, you can be doing multiple part-time jobs that will end up adding up to the hours that you need to make up for the money that you need to pay for yourself. Now let's look at working off campus during the regular scheduled breaks. During the scheduled breaks, as an international student, you are allowed to work unlimited hours. Basically, you are allowed to be a full-time worker and work as much as you want, because there's no studies going on. Scheduled breaks are the holidays that include winter, summer, spring, or fall, or during the reading weeks. So basically, even before the limitation was lifted, as an international student, during the scheduled breaks, you could work as many hours as you want, so you can just stack up the part-time jobs as long as your body can allow. And even during those times, most companies might be looking for part-timers, because most full-timers will be taking on vacations, or they'll be reducing their shifts to get some rest, because that's when the sun might be shining and they might want to take a break. So it was mostly a good time for international students to step in and at least cover up for the labor gap. But the catch to this one was, you are supposed to be a full-time student before and after that scheduled break to qualify to work during that period. So if your course is ending before the break, automatically you are not qualified to work. If you don't have a class after the break, you are not qualified to work during that period. So basically what they are trying to say is, you have to be a student after the break to be qualified to work during that particular break. That is why you were not allowed to work even before your study starts. So take note of this. So what if you are a freelancer or even self-employed? In the past, even if you are a freelancer or self-employed, you were mandated to track your hours that you were working so that you don't go over the limit that has been imposed. But thankfully, since that limit has been lifted now, even as a freelancer or as a self-employed person, you can work as many hours as you want, as long as your body will allow it, without at least risking your status while studying. So if you're a graphic designer, you are somebody who is to makeup or anything of that sort, this is a good time to at least go online and build your portfolio and get a customer so you can serve them. So whilst others are making the minimum wage, you can at least be making the big bucks. Because trust me, most of these guys are making big bucks. They can get jobs all across the world because basically they are freelancers. And if you are somebody who is self-employed, that means your income is basically not capped because you are not working by the hour. You are basically making profit. So if you have any skills that can allow you to work or be self-employed, this might be the good time to sharpen them before you move to Canada. And in this case, your working hours would have included anything that will earn you wage or include selling a service or a product. And additionally, you will need to comply with the conditions that come with your study permit. So you must be actively studying, work only the approved hours if there is a limit imposed on the number of hours that you can work, or meet any other requirement that might be set on your study permit. So it is always important, like I say, to read that study permit when you pick it up. Don't just pick it up and start walking across the arrival hall to exit the airport. Go through it and see all the conditions that might be imposed on your study permit, so that if you need to challenge anything, you can challenge it before you leave the airport. Now let's look at working on campus. You can work on campus if your study permit states that you are allowed to work on campus. Furthermore, before the limitation was even lifted on the number of hours international students could do, if you got a job on campus, you were able to work as many hours as you want. So these jobs were like hotcake. Everybody was chasing for those because if you get one of those, you can just stack them up with any job that you've gotten off campus, and you are allowed to work as many hours as you want without any limits. And I learned it the hard way when I landed in Canada and I decided to go and look for a server job on campus. I got there, I was well received, only to later find out that they felt I was overqualified to be a server. So I didn't even get that job, even though I was one of the first people to even saw the post. I basically saw the woman post the thing on the door, but trust me, they didn't even pick me because those jobs were like hotcake. People were going after them. So you need experience in those areas for them to even consider you. And for you to be able to work on campus, you need to meet the requirements of being able to work on campus. That is, you have to be a full-time student pursuing at least a post-secondary studies. You have to hold a study permit, and you need to have a social insurance number. That is a sin before most of these campus jobs will even consider you. In order not to make this video long, I will do a separate video on how to look for jobs when you land in Canada as an international student, because I've seen people struggle finding jobs. But what I would advise is, before I even get this video done, when you learn some of the channels that you can use to find jobs, my advice is always go to Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn. These 3 channels can easily help you land a job as quickly as possible. And one trick that I found out that at least helped me in landing my job was, sometimes on some of these platforms, instead of you just uploading your CV, just go in there and instead feed your details into the system, so that in case somebody is scanning the system for a particular skill set, they will be able to at least find your CV and call you for a job interview. Because sometimes some of the CVs that we upload into these systems may not be optimized for ATS. That's the software that most of these employers use to scan. Because if they have about 2,000 CVs to go through, a human eye cannot just go through and find out who qualifies. Sometimes they will just use the software to scan through and say, I'm looking for somebody with this particular skill set. So if your information is optimized for that particular system, they will now call you before they can even look at your CV and see that, okay, we think this person will be qualified. That's one of the tricks that I used when I landed to help me land the job that I got my first week, that I'm still doing now. If you are still confused and you need to check whether you need a work permit to be able to work when you land in Canada as an international student, I will leave some links in the description column that at least you can click on and go and read and empower yourself before you land in Canada, so that you can quickly find a job and help take care of yourself when you arrive in Canada here. And you'll be able to use this link to at least check your eligibility to know even the type of work permit that you need if you want to work in Canada. Until then, I'll catch you in the next video. Cheers.